guys, how y'all doing? BionicleSaurus here, and in this video we are going to be taking a look at the brand new 2019 Safari Limited Camarasaurus. It is worth mentioning that this is an early production sample, but like I said in the Prustasuchus review, I doubt that there will be any major changes between this and the final release. It's still worth a little disclaimer though. Huge thanks have to go out to Safari Limited for sending this new, beautiful figure, so without further ado, let's get into the video. This figure is gorgeous. The overall shaping and the silhouette, the pose, and the complete shape of the thing is just, it's majestic. It really is. This is a figure that really captures the weight of this animal. Camarasaurus, as a, large sauropod, was a huge animal, as you can imagine, and while many sauropod figures do sort of get that feeling of realistic weight being carried around, a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't capture that, but there's something about this figure. Maybe it's the musculature, or just kind of the way it's carrying itself, the way the limbs are positioned. It feels so realistic. It feels like it's just as heavy and as real as you'd want it to be. You can just get a feeling of a living, breathing animal off of this one. Looking at all the little bits of wrinkling and folding skin, it's just so well done. There really is a certain amount of just realism and, again, weight captured in the way this figure looks. They've done a fantastic job with that. I talked about this a bit with the Amargasaurus, but I think it's even more well done here. Something about just the pose, it really is beautiful. In terms of the sculpted detail, there's not a whole lot to speak of. This figure does not have individually sculpted scales. It has more of an elephantine, wrinkly texture, which honestly is pretty common for a lot of big sauropod figures over the years. I don't think it's overly weird to see it, although we have certainly gotten spoiled with a lot of the amazing Doug Watson sculpts that he's done for Safari that have individually sculpted scales and such, especially some of the beautiful ceratopsians and all that sort of stuff. But I think for the purposes of this figure, the detail is perfectly adequate, more so even. In general, I feel like if they had gone for more of a individually sculpted scale style of some really fine, crisp scalation, it might have been too much. I mean, this figure is really big in that I know it might be more accurate to the actual skin texture of the animal, and that would be a great positive of it, but I honestly feel like just visually that would be kind of overly busy. And in general, there is something about the more elephantine visual style that I think adds to the feelings of realism and kind of familiarity. In general, when it comes to detail and sort of the relationship of the detail and the pose and overall look of the figure, I view this figure very similarly to how I view another figure I love from Safari, which is the Giganotosaurus that came out in 2017. It's not overly detailed, but it's not really meant to be. That's not the point. The point of this figure, the main attraction of the model, is the overall pose and the silhouette and the majesty of all of that. In general, everyone loves the Giganotosaurus, and I think this figure is just in that same purposefully different artistic style. And I think, once again, like the Giganotosaurus, it works fantastically well. It also really helps to set this figure apart from some of the other Safari LTD sauropods around, and I'm not sure how intentional this was, but in general, this figure fits extremely well with some older Carnegie Collection sauropods from Safari, and it's pretty cool to see it displayed with some of those as well. As far as accuracy is concerned, this is by far the most anatomically up-to-date Camarasaurus around. It really is. It's fantastically well done. It has a lot of nice little details. You got a cloaca. All the little claws on the feet and hands are in the most currently accepted sort of positionings and orientations. And the overall just proportions and shaping is all pretty much perfect to the general skeletal anatomy. Some people have pointed out some issues with the skull, which I would like to quickly address. The main thing that I've seen a few people comment on is that the skull seems a little too elongated and that it should be more of a rounded, sort of compressed shape. Now, Camarasaurus did have quite a short, compressed-looking skull. It didn't have a lot of snout. It was very curved and all that. And in my opinion, this figure does pretty much fine with capturing the shape of the skull. I actually did a little bit of research before this video. I've been kind of looking at some images of actual Camarasaurus skulls, and in general, their snouts are a bit longer in proportion to the overall skull size than I remembered, so I don't think this is too far off at all. In fact, I think it does a better job than the older Carnegie Camarasaurus, and the old Carnegie Camarasaurus does have a more compressed, sort of rounded skull shape with a shorter snout. But when I actually look at the actual skulls of the animals, this is closer. Another thing to mention is that, according to the sculptor Doug Watson on the Dino Toy Forum, he mentioned that he actually included a very subtle and very speculative feature, which is a bit of keratin around the snout, or a bit of a beak. You can hardly see it. I'm glad they didn't paint it a different color. It is meant to be subtle, and I think that was the best way to go, because this is quite an odd speculative feature in my opinion. And that could, again, be a little bit more reason for why the snout might look a little bit longer, because there's a bit of soft tissue sort of projecting it out that you don't see on the skeleton. When it comes to the paint work on this figure, I think the color scheme is fantastic. It's very simple, but it's super believable. Again, it adds to the realism. They didn't go for anything overly bright or flashy, and I think that was the right decision for this particular figure. It has a nice combination of this kind of medium gray, which looks a heck of a lot more blue on camera than it actually is. Trust me, this figure is... I wouldn't have even thought to have called it blue looking at it in person, but the camera thinks differently. We also have this sort of tan beige color on the underside, which works perfectly well. We also have these sort of rust brown, reddish stripes down the back. I think those actually really do add something in terms of the overall visuals. I like how those look. The only part where the paint is a little weird is the head. The head has this, you know, sort of mask of beige on it, and then the top little sort of nasal chamber bit is all gray. It's a little weird. I don't know. They really like to add face paint to their sauropods. The Amargasaurus and MalawiSaurus certainly have a similar thing going on, although different patterns for each respectively. I think it works well here, though. It doesn't always look great. On the MalawiSaurus, some of the paint application is slightly questionable, although the MalawiSaurus has such a tiny head that I pretty much have to completely forgive them for that. As for the way this looks, I think it turned out just fine. I actually like it quite a bit. You know, one thing I really like about this figure, and it's a subtle thing, but I think it does contribute to the overall realism of it, and just kind of the niceness of the way it looks. It adds to how pretty this figure really is the head and sort of just the expression that's been captured there. Looking at the eye and the sort of the contours of the mouth and jaw, this looks very soulful. It reminds me of when you look at an elephant's face and there's sort of a certain life and personality and intelligence and just a certain almost wiseness or wisdom and kind of kindness behind those eyes. Similar thing captured here. It's not just a blank plastic face with blank inanimate paint covering it. They really captured personality there, and that's also, again, not an easy thing to achieve, but it's been done quite well. This side of the face even has a slight bit of sadness to it. He's kind of somber. There's something really nice about this. I don't know. This really adds to the overall look of the thing. It makes the head sculpt just stand out, in my opinion. Yeah, it looks so not inanimate, despite, of course, being so. I think that's the main crux of it all. Alright, let's bring out some size comparisons. So, first of all, there is the new 2019 Camarasaurus with the Safari Utyrannus. And as you can see, this figure is not small. And in fact, Doug Watson has actually said that this is indeed exactly 140 scale. Now, 140 scale was pretty standard for a lot of Carnegie Collection figures, and in general, it's pretty standard for a lot of companies. It's probably the most common scale for a dinosaur model or figure to really be sculpted in. But a lot of newer Safari LTD stuff is more in the 150 or 60 range, a little bit smaller. So it's cool to see this. Again, that's one of the reasons why it looks nice with some of the larger old Carnegie sauropods, like I was mentioning earlier. Now, speaking of old Carnegie sauropods, let's bring in the Carnegie Camarasaurus. These two scale up in kind of an interesting way. The Carnegie one is taller. Like, its back goes up taller, its head is a bit further up. It's about the same length, but if you look at them from the front, you can see that the new figure is far more bulky and muscular, which is excellent. It has a wider sort of gut and torso section that is all more up to date. to what we know now. In comparison, I would say this one is on the shrink-wrapped side in terms of its overall proportions and anatomy. And in terms of other accuracy stuff, I mean, yeah, this figure does everything better. It's not baring its teeth like this one. Good gravy, look at that. And I think the colors are nicer, the pose is more dynamic, it's better detailed. It really is an improvement on pretty much every level, which is really cool to see. But at the same time, these two are honestly quite similar, so they make a nice pair, and it's just, these are some great figures to really compare and contrast, and it's just neat to look at them together. Now, real quick here, I'd like to bring in some other newer Safari Ltd stuff. So there is the MalawiSaurus. He is dwarfed. Let's bring in the 2017 Diplodocus. Not quite to scale, but if you consider the Diplodocus a subadult, then I think they actually work quite nicely. Of course, they're both from roughly the same place and same time, would have interacted in life, so cool to display those two together. MalawiSaurus, you're from the Cretaceous, get away. And speaking of Cretaceous stuff, let's bring in the Amargasaurus. The Amargasaurus is still the biggest one, still quite out of scale, but, you know, gorgeous nonetheless. I can't deny it. He's longer, not as tall, and I think, just comparing the two right now, similar weight, but no, yeah, the Camara is heavier. That is one thing about this new Camarasaurus. It is hefty indeed. So, in conclusion, my final rating for this figure is a 10 out of 10. This thing was a 9 when I first got it. I was thinking to myself, well, you know, the detail could probably be better, but as time went on, I just, again, started thinking of it in the same terms I do the Giganotosaurus, and so that complaint just sort of went away by itself, and after doing some research, the skull pretty much has stopped bothering me. It honestly looks fine, and yeah, there's things to nitpick, for sure, but for me personally, I love this figure. It's going straight to my top 10 Safari figures of all time. I think it's an amazing sauropod figure. It's the best Camarasaurus on the market, and once it is officially released, you will be a fool not to pick it up, so do so once you can. But for now, you can, of course, buy any Safari Ltd products that are officially released at this time at Safari's website, safariltd.com, and you can get 10% off of any purchase there by using the coupon code BIONIC. You can also, of course, buy their products off of their Amazon store, amazon.com/safariltd. For now, I will leave you with a little comparison of this figure along with its 2019 counterpart, the beautiful Prestosuchus. If you'd like to see the review for that, you can go check it out. It is on my channel for all to see. Thank you so much for watching, and BionicleSaurus signing out.